At a party, my girlfriend introduced me as her roommate who pays half the bills. She thought it was funny. I didn't argue. 2 weeks later, her landlord called. Guess who'd moved out overnight? The moment the switch flipped, it made no sound. It was a Saturday night, and we were at a party hosted by one of my girlfriend Chloe's influencer friends. The apartment was packed with people who all seemed to talk in brand deals and curated photo opportunities. I was standing by the drink table when Chloe grabbed my arm, dragging me over to a small group. Her best friend, Jessica, was holding court, a glass of champagne in one hand and her phone in the other. And this, Chloe announced with a grand sweeping gesture toward me, is Alex. He's my amazing roommate who pays half the bills. The group laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh, more of a dismissive, patronizing chuckle. Jessica gave me a pitying smile, the kind you'd give a golden retriever who just learned to sit. "Oh, Chloe, you're terrible," she chirped, before turning back to her conversation, my existence already forgotten. I smiled, a tight, polite smile I had perfected over the last year. I didn't argue. I didn't correct her. I didn't point out that my half of the bills was the entire $1,500 rent on her 2-bedroom apartment, all the utilities and the weekly grocery deliveries, while her half consisted of the Netflix subscription and the occasional scented candle. In that moment, surrounded by the noise and laughter, I simply nodded and made a mental note. It was the final data point I needed. The project was officially a failure, and it was time to implement the exit protocol. Let me back up. I'm not a simp. I'm a systems analyst. My entire life revolves around logic, patterns, and efficient solutions. When I met Chloe 2 years ago, I was fascinated by her. She was charismatic, ambitious, and lived in a world so different from my own structured reality. She was trying to build a career as a lifestyle influencer, and I saw it as a project, a startup. I was willing to be a venture capitalist of sorts. When her roommate moved out a year ago, she was in a panic. She couldn't afford the apartment on her own. I saw a logical solution. I made significantly more money than her. I could move in, cover the major expenses to give her the stability to grow her brand, and we could build a future together. It was an investment. I laid out the terms clearly. I would handle the core finances, she would manage the household, and we would reassess in 1 year to see if her venture was becoming profitable and our partnership was working. My name was never on the lease. She was the sole leaseholder. I was just a permitted occupant who set up a direct payment from my bank account to the landlord for the full rent each month. It was a clean, efficient arrangement. But over the past year, the data started trending negative. Her brand consisted of taking pictures of expensive brunches I paid for and clothes she bought with a credit card I co-signed for. The household management was her leaving dishes in the sink and complaining that I bought the wrong brand of almond milk. The partnership was her and her friends, led by the endlessly annoying Jessica, making subtle jokes at my expense. They saw me as a quiet, boring utility, the reliable background process that kept their flashy user interface running smoothly. They never understood that the quiet guy who analyzes systems for a living is the one who sees every flaw, every inefficiency, and every vulnerability. The roommate comment wasn't an isolated incident. It was the confirmation of a pattern. She didn't see me as a partner. She saw me as a resource to be exploited. A wallet with legs. And in my world, when a system is fundamentally broken and inefficient, you don't keep trying to patch it. You decommission it and build something better. So I smiled, took a sip of my drink, and began planning her decommissioning. Update 1. The 2 weeks following that party were, on the surface, completely normal. I was pleasant, I was helpful, I played the part of the supportive boyfriend. Inside, I was a machine executing a complex plan. Phase 1 was acquisition. I spent my lunch breaks for 3 days viewing apartments. I found a perfect 1-bedroom condo in a new building downtown. It was clean, modern, and minimalist. Everything Chloe's cluttered, performative apartment was not. I signed the lease, paid the deposit, and set a move-in date for 2 weeks from the day of the party. Phase 2 was logistics. Chloe and Jessica had been planning a spa and shopping weekend trip for the exact weekend I needed. It was perfect. They'd be gone from Friday afternoon until Sunday night. I scheduled a moving company, the best and most expensive one I could find, for that Saturday. I specified a 4-man crew and told them the job was a full pack and move. I wanted my extraction to be swift and traceless. I spent the evenings that week subtly preparing. I went through every room, every closet, every drawer, and mentally tagged my possessions. I used a simple app on my phone to photograph and catalog everything that was mine, from my clothes and books to my kitchen equipment and the high-end computer setup in my office. This wasn't just about getting my stuff. It was about creating a perfect record, leaving no room for her to later claim I had taken something of hers. The day they left for their trip was a masterclass in deception. I helped Chloe pack her bag, told her to have a wonderful time, and kissed her goodbye. She and Jessica were giddy with excitement, talking about all the stores they were going to hit. "Don't have too much boring fun without me," Chloe said as she walked out the door. "I won't," I replied, and I meant it. The moment her car was out of the driveway, I switched into execution mode. I started with my office. I packed my documents, my hard drives, and my personal effects into labeled boxes. I dismantled my desk and chair. By the time I went to sleep on Friday night, my entire professional life was containerized, and the office looked like a sparse, unused guest room. I slept on the couch. Saturday morning, the movers arrived at 9 o'clock sharp. They were incredible. I walked them through the apartment, pointing out every item on my digital inventory: my clothes, my toiletries, my books, the television in the living room which was mine, the couch they were sitting on which was mine, the high-end coffee machine she used every day for her social media posts. The crew worked with silent, professional efficiency. They wrapped my furniture, packed my belongings, and loaded everything onto the truck. While they worked, I did a deep clean of the areas I was vacating. I wiped down the empty shelves in the closet, cleaned the bathroom sink, and scrubbed the space where my desk used to be. I wanted to leave a void, not a mess. The last thing to go was the mattress from our bed. It was mine, purchased before I even met her. I left her the bed frame, which was hers, and the box spring. A bare box spring in an empty room has a certain stark, poetic quality. By 3 in the afternoon, they were done. The truck was loaded and the apartment felt unnervingly large and empty. I did one final walkthrough with my app, checking off every item. Perfect execution. I tipped the crew generously and they drove off toward my new life. I was left standing in what was now, unequivocally, Chloe's apartment. Her pink, fluffy decorations and inspirational quote wall art now looked lonely and absurd. The final step was to sever the connection. I sat down on the floor, pulled out my laptop, and logged into my bank account. I located the automated monthly rent payment and canceled it. Then I composed a carefully worded email to the landlord, a man I had spoken to only once when I first moved in. The email was polite and formal. I stated that as of this date, I had permanently vacated the premises at her address. I reminded him that I was never a signatory on the lease agreement, and that all future communications and financial responsibilities regarding the property should be directed to the sole leaseholder, Chloe. I attached a digital copy of the original agreement, showing her as the only tenant. I hit send. Then I opened my phone. I blocked Chloe's number. I blocked Jessica's number. I went on every social media platform and blocked Chloe, Jessica, and their entire circle of friends. I created a digital fortress. I wanted absolute silence. I wanted the consequences to arrive for her from a world that I was no longer a part of. I took one last look around the apartment, at the ghost of a life I had invested in. I felt no sadness, no anger. I just felt the quiet satisfaction of a complex problem solved. I walked out, leaving my key on the kitchen counter, and closed the door behind me. Update 2. The first week in my new condo was peaceful. Unpacking and setting up my own space, exactly how I wanted it, was therapeutic. My systems were back online. My computer, my coffee machine, my life. Everything was efficient, logical, and blissfully free of drama. The silence from Chloe and her crew was absolute, just as I had designed. The first tremor of the earthquake I had triggered arrived the following Monday, a little over a week after my departure. It wasn't from Chloe, but from a mutual acquaintance, a guy named Ben, who was more my friend than hers. He sent me a text. "Hey man, is everything okay with you and Chloe? She's been trying to reach you and is kind of freaking out." I replied with a simple, "We're no longer together. I've moved on." Ben's response came back instantly. Okay. Wow. She's telling people you just ghosted her and that you owe her rent money. I almost laughed. The narrative was already being spun. I was the villain who had abandoned the poor, struggling influencer. I just texted back, not my problem anymore, man. Take care. I knew the real storm wouldn't hit until the first of the month, which was still a week away. The first of the month came and went. I paid the rent for my new condo. On the second of the month, I got a frantic call from Ben. He said Jessica had called him, screaming, because Chloe's landlord had just called her, furious that the rent hadn't been paid. Chloe had apparently been ignoring his calls, thinking it was a mistake. This was the call I had been waiting for. Not to me, but to her. The system was working. Chloe, unable to reach me, had apparently descended into full-blown panic. She didn't have $1,500. Her income from her social media posts was sporadic and small, barely enough to cover her weekend brunches, let alone a month's rent in a city like this. That's when the real offensive began. Jessica, being the loyal but useless best friend, took it upon herself to be Chloe's attack dog. She created a new social media account and sent me a long, rambling message. It was a work of art, full of accusations and insults. She called me a coward, a user, a monster. She claimed I had tricked Chloe into depending on me and then pulled the rug out from under her. The most ridiculous part was her claim that I had stolen things from the apartment. She said Chloe's favorite coffee machine was missing. It was my coffee machine. I had the receipt. I took a screenshot of the message and sent it to my lawyer with a note. For the file. Then I blocked the new account. The next day, Chloe's mom called me. I almost didn't answer, but my curiosity got the better of me. She was surprisingly calm, which was almost more unnerving. She explained that Chloe was very upset and that there had clearly been a misunderstanding. She said Chloe was willing to forgive me for my immature behavior if I would just call her and transfer her the rent money. I was polite. I was firm. With all due respect, I said, Chloe and I are no longer in a relationship. I have moved out of her apartment. The lease is in her name, and the financial responsibility is hers. I am not legally or morally obligated to pay her rent. But she can't afford it, her mother exclaimed, her voice finally cracking. She'll be evicted. Where will she go? That is a problem for Chloe to solve, I replied calmly. I supported her for a full year, giving her an opportunity to build her career. She chose to disrespect and devalue that support. The terms of our arrangement are over. I wished her a good day and hung up before she could respond. The landlord, a stern, no-nonsense older man, apparently gave Chloe a 5-day notice to pay rent or face eviction proceedings. This information came again via Ben, who was now my unwilling source of intel. Chloe was a wreck. She had apparently tried to launch a GoFundMe, claiming her toxic ex had left her destitute. It raised about $50, mostly from her aunt. Jessica posted a long, tearful story about Chloe's plight, which got a lot of sympathetic comments but no actual financial help. Their online friends were happy to offer emojis of praying hands, but not a single dollar. The best part, according to Ben, was the implosion of her friendship with Jessica. Chloe had apparently expected to move in with Jessica. But Jessica lived in a tiny studio apartment and had no interest in housing her broke, unemployed friend. Their friendship, it turned out, was built on the foundation of brunch and shopping trips. Without my money to fund that lifestyle, their bond disintegrated. They had a massive fight, and Chloe was now well and truly on her own. The support system she thought she had was just a collection of users, same as her. Final update: it has been 2 months since I moved out. The final act of this drama played out exactly as the logic dictated it would. Chloe was unable to pay the rent. She couldn't find a new roommate on such short notice, and even if she had, she couldn't cover the deposit and first month's rent for them. The eviction process went forward. About 3 weeks ago, Ben told me that he saw Chloe and her parents moving her things out of the apartment. There was no moving truck, just her dad's pickup. She was crying, and her parents looked furious. The influencer lifestyle, packed into cardboard boxes and loaded into the back of a 10-year-old truck. Her social media presence has collapsed. She tried to pivot her brand to be about overcoming hardship, but it came across as whiny and entitled. Her followers, who were there for the pictures of fancy cocktails and new outfits, quickly lost interest. Her comment sections, once full of praise, are now mostly empty. She had nothing to offer people except a lifestyle that was never really hers in the first place. Jessica and the rest of the friend group have completely abandoned her. Their social media is now full of pictures of them at the same old brunch spots, just with Chloe conspicuously absent. Their loyalty was to the lifestyle, not to the person. I did get one final indirect message from her. Her mother sent me a long email last week. It was a bizarre mix of pleading and accusation. She claimed I had destroyed her daughter's confidence and ruined her career prospects. She said Chloe was now living back at home in her childhood bedroom, was deeply depressed, and it was all my fault. The email ended with a demand that I pay them a lump sum of $10,000 for emotional distress and relocation expenses. I forwarded the email to my lawyer. He sent back a one-sentence reply on my behalf. We categorically reject your baseless demands and will consider any further contact to be harassment. That was the end of that. The true satisfaction for me wasn't in her failure, but in the clean, logical success of my own plan. I didn't yell, I didn't argue, I didn't engage in drama. I identified a failed system, planned a solution, and executed it flawlessly. I took what was mine and removed myself from the equation. Her downfall was not my doing, it was the result of her own choices finally catching up with her once the safety net was gone. Oh, and there was one last little detail, one final piece of data I left for her. Before I left the apartment that last day, I went to the fridge. Pinned to it with a novelty magnet she loved was a printout. It was a detailed summary from my banking app showing the $1,500 rent payment I had made to her landlord every month for the past 12 months. At the top, I had written a simple note with a black marker. It just said, "My half."